Hello, and welcome to The Truth Will Not Be Silenced, the show that allows Black people to be seen, to be heard, and to be human. I'm your host, Melissa Woodfork White. In today's episode, we will talk about marching for justice with our returning guest and activist, James Ladd. We'll discuss the controversial topic of marching for justice and the work that he has done and the work that he is doing to get justice for Peter Bernardo Spencer that needs to be shared, that allows us to be seen, to be heard, and to be human. As you all know, as a Black professional woman with over 28 years in the workplace, I am actively involved in civil rights and marching for justice. And that is because of the color of my skin. Sharing our stories allows us to be seen, to be heard, and to be human. There will be a special surprise at the end of the show. Be sure to listen all the way through for the details. Our returning guest today is none other than our very own activist, James Ladd. James is a native of Cleveland, Ohio, who graduated from Howard University in 1999 with a Bachelor of Science in Communications. He was a contestant on MasterChef Season 4. He is a very active community activist, chef scholar, business owner, father, and friend. He is passionate about community activism. James is going to share with us his work as a community activist marching for justice. Hi, James, and welcome back to the show.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. So let's get right into it. Why don't you give us a recap of why you're marching for justice?
Well, we're marching for justice in what's going to have to be a continuation of our march. In the case of Peter Bernardo Spencer, as you know, I had interest in this case from when it first started, from how it was being handled by the police initially, and the fact that the family was being stonewalled, no information was being given. It was definitely as if the police had more intention on protecting the actual murder suspect than providing justice for that family. The family of Peter Spencer. So it was definitely unacceptable right from the start. And even in their latest rulings, they've tried to determine this case to be a justifiable shooting under Pennsylvania's Castle Doctrine, which I'll go into a little bit, which wasn't surprising. It was definitely disturbing, saddening for me, and the fact that we haven't been able to get justice for this family yet. We are still going to continue the fight because the story that the police have put out is just totally, really, it's sad. Yeah. It's expected, that makes it more sad.
From what I'm hearing you say is that, per our previous conversation that we had about this case, and the happenings of this case, it sounds like to me you have new information about how this case is transpiring, because before it was, according to ABC News and NBC, CNN, a Black man, Peter Bernardo Spencer, 29, of Pittsburgh, was shot multiple times at a Rockland Township residence on December 12th. Pennsylvania State Police said this month, well, actually, it was earlier this year in 2022, 4 white individuals were present at the time of the shooting. No arrests have been made. So now you're telling us that they've changed the narrative. So
absolutely.
How has that narrative changed?
Okay, so now the narrative is that Mr. Spencer was armed and that the shooter was a hero. I'm going to go into some of the facts.
How do we go from a man being shot multiple times, James, and dead on the front yard, where you have drugs, you have weapons, you have all three of those things that you discussed with us on the first show that you appeared on, and now it's being flipped the script to he was armed. We didn't hear any of this stuff in the news. It wasn't reported that he was armed.
Nowhere.
When they found him, they didn't say that there was a weapon next to him or in his hand, which justified the shooting. So now you're telling us that this is the narrative that they're spinning instead of bringing justice for this family.
4 months later. 4 months later, this is the narrative they're trying to spin. I mean, trying to think, his name is White. I can't remember his first name. I want to say it's Sean White. He's the Venango County prosecutor. He's the one that declined to press the charges in this case. He delivered a speech last week, and the narrative that they are trying to say right now is that Peter was armed, somehow held the other 4 members of the camping party, I'll just call it that for right now, that he was holding them hostage. He had taken some drugs, he was hallucinating, and that the one member who actually shot him, because they did do a ballistics test, he was hit all from a 9mm, and we're going to go into that as well. Because in this story, they're saying that he was armed with an AK-47 and that this other man decided to gun him down and managed to gun him down with a 9mm.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there, because for those of you that don't know, the difference between an AK-47 and a 9mm is speed and power. And so if he has an AK-47, a 9mm has no chance.
That's what I'm telling you. So that's why I say
so
this guy would have to be.
If he was to fire that weapon, they would be hit multiple times all over. And with a 9mm, he was struck multiple times. But if there was a gunfire that ensued, or whatever the case may be, that doesn't make any sense to me. I'm just going to say it. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I can't even really explain the story, and I've listened to it multiple times. The story is so loosely written that I can't even explain it to you today, even knowing all the facts. I can go back word for word and listen to it. I listened to it again last night just preparing for the show, and it still makes no sense. And that's why I said, so only one member decided that he was in fear of his life so much that he decided that he was going to take his 9mm and managed to gun down a dude with an AK-47.
So here's my
question.
Managed
to hit him 9 times out of 11 bullets.
So where was the AK-47? Because what was reported is that there were multiple guns in the house, drugs, alcohol, the whole 9 in the house.
Perfect.
But his body was found on the line.
And no mention of a gun being next to him.
Where was the AK-47 then if they were defending themselves?
Exactly. So the entire story actually seemed like it was written at this point to corroborate with the little facts that they have. Now, I want to say at this time, the next step in what we're waiting for, the family is waiting for esteemed pathologist Cyril Wett, I believe his name is W-E-C-H-T, to release a statement. Should be coming out this week on the next steps of the case and what he saw on the autopsy. Because if you remember, we also saw the autopsy photos.
Yes, and that's what I was going to get into next. Go ahead.
The autopsy photos do not support the story that the police are trying to portray.
But what about the ballistics report?
So same thing.
Because if he had gunpowder anywhere on his body other than where the bullets killed him, I mean, it would be gunpowder on his hand where he was holding the AK-47 that was not found on the yard where his body was.
Right. So I haven't found that information out yet, but it's not uncertain whether or not he was shooting a gun or not, because they probably went out there to shoot guns.
Right.
That much we know. So whether or not he had that on his hands, but we do also know from the previous reports that he was shot at a long distance. So once again, you're brave enough, you're scared enough
like he was
to grab your gun, but you're brave enough to go 9mm versus AK-47. No,
it makes no sense.
It makes no sense. Makes
absolutely no sense. And you know, this reminds me of the movie Pelly. What's it called? You know the movie I'm talking about.
Exactly.
Where they take the bodies of Black people so that they can live on forever. Come on, James. What's that movie called?
You know, I barely watch movies. I'm so busy, but
I know our listeners and our viewers, I know our audience will know what I'm talking about. Jordan Peele, his movie.
Okay.
Yes, but that's what it reminds me of because they were haunting him.
Yeah, and see, this is what
He
we're gonna
was the
get
one
to.
that was being haunted, and he had no clue. He thought that he
I
was
want
just being invited on a weekend trip to get away. He had no clue that he was the one that was going to be haunted. He had no clue that that
please.
was going to be the weekend that he died. He had no clue that he would not be able to see his unborn child. You know, he had no clue. He just thought, okay, I'm being invited on a weekend. We're going to go have some fun and so forth, and ended up dead, shot multiple times. I want you to go into this, James, is we hear a lot of times on the news how when arrests are not being made, it's because someone is related to law enforcement. Is that the case in this case?
It absolutely is. From what I am told, from my understanding, I actually know the name of the shooter. I don't know why he's being so well protected. As you know, I wanted originally to have Mr. Spencer's brother on, and we'll still try to get him on. He couldn't make it with us today. To explain that they do actually know the name of the shooter. That shooter is tied into local police enforcement, which we pretty much assumed at the time, because we figured that if you just follow common sense, we knew I wouldn't have received that type of protection from law enforcement. We knew you wouldn't have received that type of protection from law enforcement. So it came to a point, like even to this day, if you try to look up who the shooter is, his name has been scrubbed from the face of the earth. I don't understand why. That's something I'm going to be working on right now. Because to me, if they release the name of the shooter, let's look into his background. We looked into Mr. Spencer's background. We looked into where he purchased his guns. We looked into his affiliations and everything else.
But
well, how come none of that was done for the shooter?
But you know,
and his name is still, I mean, it's virtually impossible to find until the actual family of Mr. Spencer told me that they knew the gentleman's name. I went, wow, because that name has never been published anywhere.
But you know what? This shows the precedent of how they handle cases where Black people, innocent Black people, are gunned down. One, they want to show the background and try to make it like it was their fault by showing all the bad things about the Black person that was shot. And then two, they don't get arrested because they have ties with someone, whether relatives or whatever the case may be, with law enforcement. And the most recent case would be Ahmaud Arbery. They wouldn't arrest those three people because they were tied and had connections to law enforcement. It wasn't until things like what you're doing and like what a lot of people have done to bring about that change. Had that story not been broke across social media on all platforms, those men would probably still be walking free.
Absolutely. And that's how I feel to this day. That's a little bit of my frustration in that we don't have the type of support. Most people still have no idea this case even occurred.
And that's because that goes back to what we talked about in our previous episode together about how the news reports what the news wants to report. The news controls that narrative. So I did see it and I was aware of it, but I haven't seen or heard anything about it since then, James. And Absolutely. So that is the outrageous. Everybody should be outraged at that. And now you're telling me once again, you have the inside track on all of the happenings and what's going on because you're tied in with his family and also their attorney and so forth. So what we're hearing today is not hearsay. This is exactly what's taking place. This is exactly what the news is not reporting on. Because I'm telling you right now, James, the only reason how I know that the narrative was changed is because you just told it to us. It was not broadcast on the news. And like I said, it is the same thing when you're saying that you know who the shooter is, you know who those people are, but they have not released any of that thing to the news outlets, or the news is choosing not to report on it for whatever reason.
Right. And I don't understand that.
Yep. So with that being said, tell us about the first march, because when you came on the first show, you were telling us about a march, the first march for Peter Bernardo Spencer. Tell us about that march.
All right. Well, that march took place February 21st of this year in both Venango County early in the morning, and then in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at Grant Street, I should say, at noon. It was definitely worth it. Gonna have to do it again. Which we could have got a little better turnout, particularly from the
I'm gonna
Pittsburgh
stop you there, because I already know you guys had a great turnout and the response was good. It may not be what you had wanted, but the numbers were there. And I need for my audience to know that the numbers were there. And you
That's
just
true.
want it to be a bigger impact, same as Ahmaud Arbery, same as Gardner, same as Breonna Taylor.
Right.
You want it splashed all across the news.
Because in all honesty, I think the only reason they're proceeded to even tell this cockamamie story is that the numbers and the outrage hasn't been where it needs to be yet. Because this, I wish I could go back and maybe we'll review this story. I'll show you the press conference of this story that they wove 4 months later, by the way. It took 4 months to come up with this story that he was armed and high and hallucinating off of mushrooms and holding the white people hostage.
What about the rest of them? Because from what
this is the point.
I understood, they were all high. They were all taking drugs.
Yeah, we
they
were
all shooting. They were all having a good time. But once again, they have isolated this innocent Black man who is the victim. And I need for everybody to know that he is the victim. And it doesn't matter what narrative that they try to spin, he is the victim. And
Absolutely.
His family is having to relive this nightmare every day that justice has not been served.
Yep, every day. And we're gonna keep going. I told them, I know the week after it came out, I know we were all, after the police narrative came out, I know we were all a little down spirited, I'll say. But then I remembered, this is what I expected. They handled it poorly from the beginning. They're going to continue to handle it poorly, particularly with the lack of outrage and the lack of knowledge that the community has on the case. Because like I said, I think if more people knew about this, there'd be no way to, number one, I'll say the first name. His name is Nathan. The killer's name is Nathan. I'm not going to read his last name. I need to talk to the attorney, Mr. Paul Jubis, and find out how that's going on, why that's the case, that his name has been so secretive throughout this entire process, and why it's okay that he received protections that the victim didn't, and he's continuing to this day. Like I said,
they're walking free, James. No arrests have been made. Nobody has been arrested.
No arrests were made.
They're walking free. Like, yeah, I can kill Black people and get away with it.
Absolutely. Under Castle Doctrine. You get scared under Castle Doctrine. Only one. Now think about this. Only one person. This is my problem with the story too. How come none of the other people were scared enough to grab their gun?
Well, the whole story is probably
I'm telling you, the whole story.
It's not backed up by any facts. It's not backed up by any evidence. It's just their hearsay.
Exactly.
And that's why I keep on using the words how they want to spin the narrative. So that it suits them, not based on any facts and not based on any evidence. And you're right, James. Why was there only one shooter? If they all feared for their lives and he was holding them hostage, why didn't they all attack?
Yes. Now, there's a gentleman by the name of Tony Norman. He wrote a great article in the Post-Gazette. I need everyone to go out and read that. It was 11 questions that still need to be answered after the police's press conference. And he feels much the same way I felt. I may have even met Tony Norman at the march. I think I did. I'm 90% sure I did. Seeing his picture next to there, I think he interviewed me just a little bit. But one of the things I want to get to right now, just evidentially, is that this is why I'm really waiting on the report from Silhouette. Remember, one of the shots looked as if he was either shot directly through the mouth and it either exited lower out his neck, or he was shot through the neck and exited out his mouth. But if we take the front angle that the police are trying to tell us, that shot is impossible, because that shot would have to go from up to down if he was shot frontwards. The police are also trying to tell us that the way he was shot in the back and the front was because his body contorted and twisted on the way down while he was being shot.
And once again, there's no forensic evidence
that's going to support that. Because even in that just one shot, Melissa, here to here would mean that he was over him, shooting down at an angle. Or if you want to reverse the narrative, that would mean he was facing the other way and shot from here to here. So whichever way you want to put that bullet, it does not support the narrative. No. And that's only one bullet, but that's one I really.
That's what I was about to ask you. What about the other bullets? He was shot multiple times, and they're only focusing on one bullet, James?
No, they're focusing in on the fact that somehow the 9mm managed to spin him and twist him and make all these bullets possible. And it's just so improbable. So that the angle of the bullets that I've already seen,
in real life, and we know the Matrix is a movie.
He got hit here, and then somehow it spun him, and he got shot in the butt, and then it spun in the back, and then he spun back around, and he said, no. No.
Now, James, correct me if I'm wrong. Was he shot multiple times from the front, or the back and front?
Back and front.
So there had to be more than one shooter.
Back and front. Well, ballistics says it all came from one 9mm. Only one guy, the guy Nathan.
Well, then he had to have been trying to get away in order for him to have been shot from the front and the back. So that's
what we're saying, and that's what common sense tells you.
Shows that he was trying to get away, because if only one person shot that gun and he was shot from the front and the back, he was trying to get away.
Absolutely. And that's what it looked like to me, because he has shots in his buttocks. And then, like I said, that shot that either went through his neck and out his front teeth, or in his front teeth and out the back of his neck. When you take that angle, there's no way he could have stood on level ground with him across the campsite and managed to shoot that particular shot. It's impossible. I know this, and I'm no crime scenes expert or anything. It's impossible. Now, if he was standing over his body and shot him, it could have went here and out.
But you know what? That's another thing, right? You touched on this in the beginning, is how close or how far they were away from him. And that shot that you're talking about, it had to have been made up close.
Yeah.
That shot could not have been made. Correct me if I'm wrong, James. That shot could not have been made far away, 10 feet away, 15 feet away.
First of all, that shot couldn't have been made, like I said, because he would have had to been, it was a trajectory going down. Think of this. It had to go here to here.
But there's
no way. So
it had to be done up close, and he had to already have been down. So that was like, you know how when people are, well, I'm going to say some people, I'm not going to say everybody, and I'm not going to generalize all of them, but just from my understanding and my perspective, that sounds like somebody that was standing over him.
Absolutely, it does.
Okay.
That's what the evidence looked like. That's what the evidence looked like from the beginning.
Once he went down, they went in like now. That's what it sounds like to me.
It's only 4 months later that we are getting this story that, yes, a craftily woven story that pretty much protected the shooter under the Castle Doctrine so that he couldn't be charged. Castle Doctrine is so weak. It's pretty much, you're on your property, you get scared, you have the right to defend yourself, pretty much.
Okay, but that is irrelevant because he was invited to that property.
I understand that, but yes.
I mean, I'm not legally certified, but I do understand laws, policies, and procedures. And that document is just like you said, it's weak. It doesn't pertain to that because he was invited. You're gonna
well,
say
they
that
just,
you weren't scared when you invited this person to your property, and then after this person came to your property, you felt scared, so you had to riddle his body with multiple bullets front and back, and then go in for a kill shot up close and personal? I'm not buying it.
I mean, no
I'm
one
not
should
buying it.
be. No one should be buying it. I'm not. I'm not selling it. It's weak. It was
And I
disappointing.
understand, James, that there may, if you invite someone over to your house, there may be, some differences that take place, but they don't result in somebody being shot multiple times and then a kill shot up close and personal, and then being found on the front lawn dead.
Yeah, there was some story like he was building a fire and he wanted them to go get firewood and they wouldn't go get firewood. This is the exact story that they were trying to tell. And so
you trying to tell me that he was an invited guest and he was trying to dictate to the people that invited him? Now we know that does not commonly happen. When you're invited over to somebody's house, you don't take over their house. And so basically they're trying to say that they invited this young Black man over
and he
to their
took over.
And he was taking charge. And James, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it.
You're not the only one. No one should.
I'm not buying it.
I was surprised they even sold it, but I'm like, wow, this is what you're going to give me after 4 months. Son. This is what you're giving that
family. Tell us now, James, you did another march prior to coming back on our show. So tell us about that second march, because you guys are making it until the word gets out, and I know it's going to be hard with everything that's happening overseas, and they want to give, I'm not even going to get into that, James, because we got a lot of problems in our own country that need to be focused on before we talk about what's happening outside of this country. But that's just my perspective. I'm not speaking for anybody else. That's just my perspective. So we're trying to get as much attention brought to this case as possible because we want to see justice done. And we also want things like this to stop, to end. And eventually there's going to come about change. And we're going to continue to march. We're going to continue to advocate. We're going to continue to make our voices known until that change comes. So tell us about that second march that you did prior to coming back for the show.
Second march was directly back in Venango. We felt it was important, just like this upcoming march, now that they have given us the decision. Pretty much I told the family I'm dedicated that every 12th that I'm either off or I can get off work, I would like to go to Venango with their support, probably Black Power and Empowerment Project. I do know William Anderson was there. He's been involved with this case. He's the head of the Black Power Political Empowerment Project, I believe, in Pittsburgh. He was definitely there. He helped lead the second march, the one that was in Pittsburgh. So we are making connections. We're getting to know people. I also didn't know, I told you when I've been going there, the racial problems that Pittsburgh had that I got to find out when I got there. The no-knock warrant that killed the little girl, I want to call it electrocution. Yeah, when you tase someone to their death, it was really an electrocution of another gentleman that happened really weeks after this case. So just filling people in as to what's going on, because even then I hadn't heard of any of those cases. I hadn't heard none of that. I'm going, okay.
So let me ask you this. Was any of this even in the local news, James? Because you're very research-based in supporting this March for Justice.
Not enough, because even
so they did put a little blurb in the local. We didn't hear it on the national level, and we haven't heard it on the world level, other than the fact that the event took place like 4 months ago.
Yep. Same as this case. I've actually, when I looked up and I wanted to research some things for today, if you notice, if you look up this case now, there are probably more blurbs explaining now the police's side of the story than there are the original story.
So once again, they're trying to spin their own narrative.
Exactly.
They're not releasing the facts They're not releasing the forensic. They're not releasing anything that doesn't support their narrative. And what
Right. And
you
their
have just
narrative was
clearly
written, I think it was
said
written
is
to them.
that they're only spinning their narrative. They only want people, because we've already heard about the story. We know about the story. So now they're only putting out what they want put out. That's going to help them, allow these people to go free, and then no justice to be served for Peter Bernardo Spencer. And it's an outrage. It's just an outrage. So now I want you to tell us how everybody can get involved. You had a great turnout these last 2 rallies, but we just need to get this across national. And so with that being said, give us all of the information that we need so that we can continue to support, get people out there who want to support, get people out there who are just like you, that is tired of this happening over and over again. So let us know.
All right. Well, I did start the organization, J Moves People. You can always reach me at jmovespeople at gmail.com. That is the letter J, MOVESPOPLE at gmail.com. On there, you can get any information on current events, marches that we will be doing. Right now, as I said, we are waiting on Dr. Cyril Reck to let me know what the family wants to do yet and how they'll be proceeding. But I do know we're going to continue this fight. I wanted to let them know, I just talked to them yesterday to let them know that I'm definitely not buying that story. I will definitely be out there April 12th, which will then be 5 months since this went down, just to let them know and Venango County know that we are not accepting their version of events, and we're not going to let this go away silently. So I think that was very important. It will be April 12th. If you go on, I'll be able to give you an exact time. If you go on the website, I'll be able to give you exact time of the march, but I am 100% sure we will be in Venango once again, April 12th, because that will be the 5-month anniversary of when this all started. Approximately now 1 month from this new announcement, and hopefully Dr. Weck will be able to give his forensic expertise, which I'm waiting on. Because like I said, there's no way under their semblance of what they're saying happened that those bullets entered his body in different paths, different areas, front, back, buttocks.
Shooter.
Yeah.
Distance.
From is either his mouth or his neck, plus his torso, plus his butt. Come on. Yeah. From so 1.9 mm.
Everyone that's listening and watching, please be sure to get in touch with James Ladd. Go to his website, email him.
Yep, go
whatever
to my Facebook.
You guys can do to help and support. We are doing a call to action because Peter Bernardo Spencer, his unborn child, his family, siblings, they all deserve justice for him. So with that being said, James, once again, it is my pleasure. Thank you so much for coming back and joining us again. I appreciate all of the hard work that you're doing, that you're putting into to make sure that Peter Bernardo Spencer gets justice. I will continue to support you in whatever way that I can. And I just want to thank you for all of the work that you're doing and all of the work that you have done to continue to bring attention to this very important case. Thank you, James.
Well, I tell everyone, I thank you. You got to let your fighters fight. You got to let your poets write. You got to let your teachers teach. I have a shirt on that says something very similar, but everybody just do what they can do, and the world will end up a much better place. I honestly believe.
Yes. So next week, we'll continue to discuss controversial topics about race and have conversations about personal and professional experiences with racism, love loss, employment, and education. Stories that need to be shared, seen, and heard that makes us human. The truth will not be silenced. To be seen, to be heard, to be human. The surprise. So for those of you that like and follow the show and leave positive comments, we're going to give you some shout outs. So if you have a business, if you have an organization, if you have products, services, or an event coming up, leave us some positive comments and we'll be sure to shout you out on this show. Buzzsprout, following the show link In the show notes, let's Buzzsprout know we sent you and help support our show. Buzzsprout is the best way to launch a professional podcast. Want to ask a question? Be a guest or subscribe to this podcast? The Truth Will Not Be Silent. Click on the show link. Thank you for joining us today.